So Notre Dame pulled off the recruiting sweep against Penn State, and I thought that was it. But apparently it's not over, at least according to some Notre Dame fans.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked on to Penn State football recruiting, and as always, thank you so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day, your daily source for all things Penn State sports. My name is Zach Seyko, and I am your host of the show, credentialed media member for both Penn State football and Penn State wrestling. Today's show is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Thank you to the everydayers out there for making us a part of your regular routine. And if you're not an everydayer, become one. Subscribe to the YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcast. We are talking more Penn State football recruiting as the battle, of course, is going to wage on between Penn State and Notre Dame on the recruiting trail. But apparently this isn't over, where Notre Dame thinks it's going to continue its momentum. I'm going to tell you why it is, in fact, over. But now Michigan looms. Michigan is looming to do the exact same thing, pull off a sweep against Penn State. But Penn State is punching back, and there are recruits that are set to commit to Penn State. At least they're projected to. So we're going to get into all of that more on today's show, starting with this Notre Dame-Penn State battle. So to recap, it was not a good week. This was in such a short span, too, where Penn State, I think if this was spread out over a couple of months or even just the month, but it was back to back to back to back. And I think that's what stings the most. And also because these were priority targets and a couple of them were in the state of Pennsylvania. Joey O'Brien, top prospect in Pennsylvania, depending on who you ask. I think it's Kevin Brown, offensive tackle, but I definitely see a case for safety, wide receiver, cornerback, wherever you want to play him. He's going to be a talented player at the next level. Commits to Notre Dame, but that wasn't even the first one. Grayson McHugh, arguably Penn State's top offensive tackle target for this cycle, ends up committing to Notre Dame. And then Joey O'Brien. But even before that, Kari Adams out of the state of Maryland, defensive back, most likely projects as a cornerback, also committed to Notre Dame. But then that didn't stop. I don't want people to also miss out on the fact that Penn State was targeting another high upside offensive tackle prospect, a little more unknown in this cycle. His name's Charlie Tom out of the state of Massachusetts, and he ended up committing to Notre Dame. From the intel that I gathered there is that Penn State really liked him. He really liked Penn State, but he was waiting out for Notre Dame to make an offer. Penn State, meaning that Penn State was his second choice. So that one wasn't going to go that way. But you would think that it's going to stop there, at least for the time being. Well, there's momentum, certainly on Notre Dame's side in general. I do think it's going to stop because there's really not a lot of mutual recruiting battles in the present. It's in the future where things can get interesting. Notre Dame was obviously going to target 2027 running back commit. Yes, commit, not target. Kemon Spell. Kemon Spell is a top 10 player in the nation for next year's class. He's committed to Penn State. Of course, Notre Dame, J1 Sider, right? They're going to reach out. They're going to try to at least get in his ear and say, hey, you should follow me to Notre Dame. You should follow me to South Bend. At least for the time being, that seems to be still in Penn State's favor. He verbally expressed that his commitment is shut down, that he's locked into Penn State. So Notre Dame fans are optimistic that this one will eventually be a flip, but I'm still going to side with Penn State on Kemon Spell. That's not the only Penn State commit that Notre Dame's going after. They just recently offered 2020 wide receiver commit Khalil Taylor. If you don't know about Taylor, Penn State's off to a fantastic start for 2027. I know I routinely say that for these cycles because that's true. They usually start out within the top 5, and then they do slowly regress in the rankings as other teams catch up. But they do get off to a hot start every single time. They have a top 10 prospect and a top 30 overall prospect. Khalil Taylor, top 3 wide receiver, top 30 in the nation. These guys will be 5 stars as the rankings continue to materialize. Well, Notre Dame just recently offered him. Okay, so now here's a direct head-to-head battle. Why I think that Penn State is going to be in great standing for both and why they shouldn't, yes, they're going to respect Notre Dame's efforts, but I'm not as concerned here. I do think in part the 2026 cycle didn't exactly go this way, go in the favor of Penn State where they had this complete 4 prospect sweep. One, Notre Dame did fair and square win some of these recruiting battles. Number 2, Penn State invested very heavily into roster retention. The remaining, any reserve NIL funds that they could have used in these recruiting battles all went to retaining the nucleus for this upcoming season. So why you're already seeing Penn State have pretty ample success for a cycle that we're not even really discussing much right now, 2027, because a lot of that NIL is going to be freed up after Drew Aller leaves, Nicholas Singleton, Katron Allen denied, Dennis Sutton, Zach Wheatley, Zane Durant. You get my point. Is that roster retention is expensive, and Penn State is all in. Michigan dealt with the same thing. They retained a majority of their roster going into that championship season. Whether you think it's legitimate or not, they still did that. Penn State is following that same roster retention. It's going to cost money to keep these guys going from the NFL draft or going to the NFL draft. So when those players do eventually move on because they're out of eligibility, okay, now Penn State can start to focus again on the transfer portal and recruiting. Speaking of which, the transfer portal, Trevor Pena, Amari Campbell, that money, that NIL money went to them as opposed to the 2026 cycle. So to sum it all up, Penn State heavily invested on trying to win a title for this 2025-2026 season, because that's when the postseason will be, as opposed to they sacrificed going into the future. So they were willing to take a hit on the 2026 class to try to get closer to a national title. And I do not blame them. I do not blame them one bit for doing that, but you are going to take some hits on the recruiting trail if you don't have the ample NIL funds. But like I said, I do think Notre Dame won a majority of these battles fair and square. However, you also have to admit that Penn State probably didn't have enough NIL money to go around to make a prospect, reconsider if it was really that close. So for the time being, Penn State doesn't have to worry about Notre Dame in these head-to-head recruiting battles. They do need to worry about Michigan now because, as I say, all right, Notre Dame's not a problem. Now Michigan is, and why the Wolverines could pull off a similar sweep here in the very coming days. That is all going to be discussed next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And this episode is brought to you by Rugiet. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them, but if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugiet Ready. Rugiet Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rugiet's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under the tongue and kicks in fast, on average in 15 minutes. And effects can last up to 36 hours. So you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. If traditional options haven't worked, Rugiet might just be the answer. Over 150,000 men have already made the switch. Head to Rugiet.com/LockedOnCollege. Use code LockedOnCollege to get 15% off today. That is Rugiet, Rugiet.com/LockedOnCollege, and use promo code LockedOnCollege for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit the Rugiet website for full safety information. So the second that Penn State doesn't have to worry about Notre Dame, Now they got to turn their attention to the Wolverines. And the Wolverines are going to do something similar here where they get not one, not two, but three mutual prospects. At least they're projected to. And actually, at the time of this recording, one has already happened. The first domino to fall is Marky Walbridge. And that was Penn State's pivot going back to Grayson McHugh. You lose one of your top tackle targets, offensive tackle targets. Marky Walbridge becomes an ideal target. Both of them. Ideally, Penn State would have wanted to land both of them. They're going to get neither of them. Michigan ends up landing Walbridge. So that's the first one. The one that hurts even more than that, on the heels of losing Joey O'Brien, Kari Adams, Dorian Barney. Penn State seemed like they were in a great spot for Dorian Barney. For those who don't know, he moved down to Georgia to finish up his high school football career. He's actually originally from Erie, Pennsylvania. Okay, a homecoming of sorts. It's not going to happen. At least it's projected to not happen. Barney, who seemed like he was, at least all signs were pointing to Penn State. They were able to fend off Texas A&M, but he takes one final visit to Ann Arbor, and now things have changed. So that's two. And then Travis Johnson, wide receiver. This one, Penn State's in a good spot at wide receiver. They have three wide receiver commits between Davion Brown, LeVar Keys, and Jasir Rogers. I don't know that Travis Johnson would have wanted to be that fourth wide receiver commit, if you will, but he did take a Penn State visit. Penn State absolutely would have wanted him, and he stays within the Big Ten Conference. Again, he goes to a direct competitor. That's not what you want if you're the Nittany Lions. You would, if you're going to lose a prospect, you would like him to go somewhere else. And then there's a fourth prospect here that I want to talk about, and it's Carter Meadows. Carter Meadows is one of Penn State's top edge defender, defensive end targets in this cycle, as he should be. He's not a consensus 5-star, but he is a 5-star according to On3, would be one of Penn State's headline prospects in this cycle. But let me also loop in what was said about Luke Wafel as well, because it was reported, I think by Michigan 24/7, that the Wolverines have a 2-year, give or take $2.2 million NIL offer out to Carter Meadows. Okay, so that's the alleged word. Well, if Penn State couldn't put together the NIL money for Luke Wafel, then you can forget about Carter Meadows. Now, Meadows could end up going to Ohio State. I think that recruiting battle is really down to Michigan or Ohio State. I've talked to Brian Smith, recruiting expert here with Locked On. A lot of people are familiar. More people are familiarizing themselves with him. He's told me it's still Ohio State, at least the intel that he's receiving. But Michigan probably thinks, people that are associated with Michigan would say that is Michigan's recruitment to lose. However, the Wolverines are really making it difficult for Penn State right now. Not one, not two, but three seem to be guaranteed with Carter Meadows. And again, does it really change anything? It's not like he's going to Georgia in the SEC. It's either Michigan or Ohio State. So the recruiting losses, and I know that things are starting to turn around for Penn State because, all right, let me stop focusing on the bad so much. You know, I wanted to rehash Notre Dame and talk about why, okay, you don't have to worry about Keemon Spell and Khalil Taylor for 2027, but I also need to acknowledge Michigan because they're getting ready to do the similar type of sweep here, but Penn State's getting ready to pull off a sweep of its own. So yeah, we're talking about this cold streak, but they're getting ready to heat back up. They had the one commitment here, which we're going to finish up with in the final segment. Pierce Petersohn, tight end commit now, 4-star, out of the state of Minnesota. They go into Minnesota territory and get one of the best prospects in the state, Golden Gophers. That was a slam dunk for them. Penn State obviously ruined those plans. And then now there are projections in per On3 that they're going to land 2 defensive end targets, one of which in the state of Pennsylvania, Jackson Ford, tons of upside. Most is going to stay home here, and Ohio State was really pushing for him. So Penn State might have just beat the Buckeyes here for Jackson Ford. Again, his commitment is until Friday. So, but things are looking promising for the Nittany Lions. And then Tyson Harley, defensive end out of the DC area, Washington, DC, Gonzaga High School, teammates with Emmanuel Iheanacho. Does that play into that recruitment at all? Teammate, friend, goes to Penn State. That would be fantastic, right? If that has any leverage there. But Deion Barnes finally catching up. He gets 2 defensive end targets that they have prioritized in, right? The optimism is there. That's where everything stands. So to get Ford, to get Harley in the fold, to boost this class to 23 commits in total, Penn State at least has gone down swinging. Even though they didn't get every single priority prospect and the elite of the elite, this is still going to be a top 15 group. And recruits and the commits that are in this class, you are going to see their recruiting ranking bump up a bit. I think of Terry Wiggins. I think of Jasir Rogers, just to name a couple of guys. I think eventually we'll see, for example, a Darrell Casey, the free safety. These guys just need to show it, to prove it. Amari Polidor is somebody that's going to see a boost in the recruiting rankings as well. But this class isn't an afterthought. It's not as bad as everyone is making it, or a lot of people are making it out to be. Did Penn State take some gut punches? Absolutely. Are they going to take some more? But they've certainly rebounded, and they're still in a strong place. And it's not over until it's over. Some statement victories against Oregon and or Ohio State would probably get some prospects to reconsider. The cycle is not over until December, early signing day, when this actually becomes official. So Penn State will continue to work hard. As we've seen, they weren't really in that Pierce Petersohn recruitment. Penn State gets to the groundwork. They gain some ground, and they ultimately pull off that commitment. I know Minnesota's upset. They did not expect that to happen, and it did. So the Nittany Lions it's been a roller coaster. It's been a roller coaster. It's here one moment, everything's great, and the next moment, wow, that was not good. That was bad. And now we're kind of in this middle area where Penn State is winning recruiting battles, but they're also losing some to ideally teams you wouldn't like to. SEC, it's one thing, but in the Big Ten and Notre Dame, yeah, not so good. Let's finish, though, with recent tight end commit Pierce Petersohn. Talked about him in an episode recently. Go check that one out, but also how Penn State continues to be tight end U. I think they have a better case than the Iowa Hawkeyes at this point in time. So we're going to talk about what Ty Howell has done and the outlook for the tight end room coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And this episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Do you ever wish managing your money felt easier? Well, with Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch Money puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center where you can track all of your accounts, investments, spending, all in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. And with Monarch Money, it helps me because I want to be able to build up my savings. And Monarch Money allows me to track different investments, different purchases, subscriptions, and be able to lay it all out for me. So just so I know where my money is going and what I am able and what I need to do with it in order to grow my savings. So you can take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for, get this, 50% off your first year. That's right, 50% off your first year. monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. And we'll wrap up with the tight end room. Pierce Petersohn is the latest addition to this room. Go check out my recent episode where a deep dive into player profile, what he's going to bring to Penn State. A lot of upside, freakish athleticism. He's playing quarterback. That's why I don't like to make those loose comparisons that, oh, this player reminds me of this player and this player reminds me of that player. But in terms of the blueprint and the similar traits that Petersohn has, it is easy to compare him and say that he could be the next Tyler Warren. He's playing quarterback in high school as we speak. 6'5", 200 pounds. So he will need to add some weight, but he's got the height. He's got the athleticism. He's got that quarterback ability that you could use in these Wildcat packages. He is a long-term developmental prospect, and Penn State was able to secure that commitment. He joins a very loaded tight end room. Ty Howell has done an exceptional job as the tight ends coach. You now have from 2020, so Khalil Dinkins, the veteran of this group, but the 2023 class, 2 4-stars and Andrew Rapplier and Joey Schlaffer, 2 4-star tight ends, 2 top 10 at their position. Then 2024, Luke Reynolds, 5-star tight end. 2025, 5-star tight end in Andrew Olish, and then 2 4-star tight ends in Matt Henderson and Brian Kortovich. If Penn State didn't pick up a tight end commit in this 2026 cycle, wouldn't have shocked me, surprised me, and I wouldn't have been upset about it. Penn State did want to secure a tight end commit because I think eventually there might be some natural attrition. You can only run 3 tight end sets so often. At some point, somebody's going to enter the transfer portal, I would think. But Khalil Dinkins will move. Khalil Dinkins is the only guaranteed loss after the season, meaning that you return every single name that I just mentioned, and then you add Petersohn to the group. Now, there isn't an expectation for Petersohn to play right away, but when he's a redshirt fresh, he's going to go through a redshirt season. He has to, when you're a tight end and you're coming into the program at 200, 210 pounds, Joey Schlaffer was dealing, and he was 220 when he came in. You need to be at least 240 conservatively. All the tight ends on Penn State's team are 250 plus. So you got to be at least 240, but you can. Penn State, at least for the time being, shows that they are committed to running a lot of 12 personnel. They understand that this is Big Ten football, which means you got to have big personnel. And Penn State, once again, has a legitimate case to be tight end U. Iowa Hawkeye fans don't like that, and I totally get why. But when you compare and contrast, okay, that's great that George Kittle and Noah Fant, they're productive in the NFL. George Kittle's an all-pro tight end with the San Francisco 49ers. I didn't realize that Iowa was responsible for how the 49ers use George Kittle within their offense. I didn't know Iowa Hawkeyes had influence on that. The last time I checked, the production that Penn State has had at tight end at Penn State is significantly better than what Iowa's done. Can't even hold a candle to it. Kittle, Laporta, Fant, any of them don't have the same statistics to back up what Tyler Warren. Tyler Warren just finished as a Heisman candidate. It takes three seasons, 3 individual seasons from Iowa Hawkeye tight ends to even match what Tyler Warren did this past year. So Penn State is tight end U because they get the production at the college level and simultaneously develop them to send them off to the NFL. Oh, well, yeah, George Kittle's an all-pro. Look at Sam Laporta when he's not hurt. Where was that in college? Not to the extent of what Penn State did with Mike Gesicki and Pat Freiermuth and recently Tyler Warren. And then next up, it's going to be Luke Reynolds and Andrew Rapplier. And yes, Khalil Dinkins, but long-term, Khalil Dinkins is only going to have 1 season. You're going to have Luke Reynolds, who gets to go through probably 2, maybe 3. We'll see. Again, NIL roster retention, you could keep him back. Andrew Rapplier. And then after that, Andrew Olish or Brian Kortovich or Matt Henderson or Pierce Petersohn. So Penn State's set up to continue to add to their resume for why they should be considered tight end U by not just me, but by more than half of the people that are interested in this debate. And that is where we will finish things on this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. Appreciate each and every one of you for checking out the show. Appreciate all the support, including the everydayers for making us a part of your regular routine. If you're not an everydayer, become one. Subscribe to the YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments section. And for more conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams, whether it's football recruiting, wrestling, basketball, you name it. Keep it right here on Locked On Nittany Lions.